figure out how to express that I truly love Star Wars. Like, I could take to social media and needlessly bitch about things that I can't control, but, you know, I think a few people have that covered right now. I could develop a shrine, but I'm kind of already well on my way. I'm running out of things to do here. I mean, I just wish somebody had some ideas. That's right. If you quantify something on a numerical scale, you must really love it. Way more for my own sanity than anyone cares. These are my definitive rankings of the Star Wars movies. I didn't do it necessarily by number. I kept things a little bit interesting. So I'm going to be going from bottom to top.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
Attack of the Clones. And I don't think this is very shocking for too many people. This is a lot of people's least favorite Star Wars movie, even through the controversy that was the sequel trilogy. So it kind of pains me that these movies are ranked fairly low for me, particularly Attack of the Clones. I just don't think the romance sells it, and that is the part of the movie that is supposed to be the most important part. Now, Star Wars has always had elements of romance, some trilogies more than others, but it's never been the full focus before, though, and I think this movie really takes its crack at making it the very most important thing that's happening, and it just kind of shows that balance is definitely important in both the Force and in movie structure. George Lucas is not that great at writing dialogue. I'm convinced this man has never flirted before, because the interactions between Anakin and Padme are just, it's like a serial killer and his prey. It's like watching a season of You, except that guy is somehow more charming. I think where Anakin could have been set up as a protagonist that we root for, he's instead portrayed as considerably whiny, and I'm not talking about when his mother dies. That's totally valid that he loses his mind over that, and there's just way too much time spent on foreshadowing his turn to Darth Vader. Like, we know that happens. I would have rather them made him more likable as opposed to just kind of being this shadow, this brooding shadow that the Jedi treat like crap. So it just isn't the movie for me.
Don't touch anything.
Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Now, the tough thing about this one is that this reinvigorated the entire franchise. I definitely like it better than Attack of the Clones. I think it has some promising factors in it, some really good action, an amazing villain that I wish was fleshed out more. Wishes do come true. And I think that The Phantom Menace has a lot of promise to it, but it suffers from really stilted dialogue and just not a very warm story. There's nothing about these characters that really makes you root for them necessarily beyond the constructs of what we already know about Star Wars. I don't think that this one really sells it, and the emotional weight of it just falls really flat. It's a shame, because like I said, the acting talent in this movie is fantastic, and to waste that, which is the whole story of a lot of the prequels, I just don't think it's a very good setup for a new trilogy. It's not the worst. Jar Jar is trash, and we get some really good visuals in terms of different planets and different species, and pod racing is fun, but the overall movie kind of swallows like dry toast.
Who are your people?
I don't have people.
Solo.
I don't hate Solo. I just think that it was totally unnecessary for it to be made. It's a Han Solo movie. It's definitely not boring by any stretch. I don't think the performances are terrible either. I don't think Alden was really anything to write home about, but I do think that Donald Glover's Lando is exceptional. Emilia Clarke adds a little flair to this as well. I think that her romance is actually the most compelling new thing that we have in Star Wars in terms of Solo and how that was expanded. They didn't negate his relationship with Leia. I said that in my review, that it was really important that that didn't happen. I think that with Solo, it just lacked any spark to it, where it had the heart of the character sort of, but it just didn't have the story that really pushed it along. Like, whereas Phantom Menace had the story technically, because, you know, it had like the overall construct of what we needed to happen. Solo has the characters, it just doesn't have the story, and I don't think that it pulls through in that sense that it's not really a major motion picture worthy. If this was something that was released as a film on Disney Plus, I think this would have been something that we would all have been more impressed with. And it didn't help that it came after the release of The Last Jedi, so a lot of fans were feeling a little disheartened with the franchise, so it's to no surprise that this one falls here.
Do you have something, a cowl or something you could put on?
The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi, at risk of sounding like a broken record, I just think that this movie threw such a wrench in terms of the sequel trilogy. The sequel trilogy starts off on a very high note. This one, it's not a bad movie. If this was its own singular film, I think that Rian Johnson does excellent work with, like, Knives Out's a really good example of that he does really good singular movies. But the fact that Star Wars has to be tied so heavily to lore is what makes this so complicated. And he takes a lot of characters like Luke Skywalker and makes them hard to like. And that's difficult because Luke is a lot of people's childhood favorite characters. I think that this is an example of what happens when a director takes too many liberties and kind of goes too much in their own way, and why acknowledging the lore is really important in terms of impressing Star Wars fans. Because when you're 8 movies into a saga, you need to be writing this for the fans as well. It does need to have a story, and it does need to have your wow factor. And I think Rian Johnson knows how to deliver the wow factor. The problem is that it was more like, wow, okay, why did you do that factor?
Hello there.
Revenge of the Sith is a good movie. I enjoy Revenge of the Sith. I think that it's something different because the bad guys win, and that's something that we don't see too often in Star Wars. I mean, we see it in Empire Strikes Back and we see it here. The Last Jedi is, Revenge of the Sith is the downfall of the Jedi, and it's something that would have had a lot more impact if it had the support of its previous 2 movies. So I think that it falls very short there, and that's the unfortunate part, because I really think that this movie could have been so much better if it had that build-up of the previous 2 films. But Revenge of the Sith closes the way that it needs to. Anakin's fall to the dark side is effective, while really quick, and I think that it could have probably been fleshed out a little bit better. It goes over well. Ewan McGregor's acting is fantastic. His scenes with Anakin, particularly in the end, are just so heart-wrenching, and it's just something so beautiful that I wish we could have seen more of. Well, and this movie is so heavy if you watch it after watching the Clone Wars series, so it does deliver the punches, it just doesn't have the narrative support.
This is for you.
The Rise of Skywalker suffers from the same exact fate as Revenge of the Sith, except the fact that it's even more confusing because it had an excellent first film in its artillery and a second film that acted as a second beginning. And that's the frustrating part, because when you have 2 beginnings, how do you provide a concise and satisfying ending when everybody has a different concept and idea of what makes a good Star Wars movie? But I, all in all, really enjoy Rise of Skywalker. I think that it's rushed in the beginning and its pacing is sometimes. They do try to sort of be like, well, this happened and you just should deal with it. And once you do, it's a very enjoyable experience. I think that we go through a narrative arc with these characters finally, and we see them fleshed out and developed. There's a lot of training. There's a lot of expansion of lore in a sense without having to go too deep into it. It leaves a lot open-ended. There's a lot of questions at the end of this movie, but there is still a lot of satisfying conclusions as well. We reach Rey's conclusion. We do get this conclusion of the Skywalker saga. It's a little divisive how that goes, but I personally really like how that ended. It resonated with me, at least, because I think that ultimately the Rise of Skywalker really solidifies and lands on the premise of it doesn't matter what your blood is and who you are, but it's who you choose to be and who you choose to align yourself with. And that it still perseveres with the concept that it's never too late. And I think that those are the core values of Star Wars, and the utmost respect for how they implemented Carrie Fisher given the circumstances. I just think this movie is a victim of circumstance, but I do think that it pulls through stronger than Revenge of the Sith did in its circumstances. Return of the Jedi. I don't think it's possible to dislike this movie. It gives you the happy ending and the satisfying warmth that you wanted for the original trilogy is the only one that has a beginning, middle, and end, and all of which are extremely satisfying. It gives you those points A, B, and C, and it really hits the right spot in Return of the Jedi. It's not quite as epic, I think, as its previous installments. It's a little bit more predictable, but predictability does not mean it's a bad movie. If anything, it gives what the audience wants. And that's not always a bad thing too, writers, because if it reaches that point on a narrative level, I think it's awesome. And the scenes in this movie between Luke and his dad, I think that it's a very great conclusion between Anakin and Luke's arc. I think that Anakin's redemption is something that not a lot of people expected back then. And for the fact that he gives everything up for his son, because his son throws everything away in terms of, I will die for you, Father, and I want you to understand that this light inside of you is still there, and I believe in it. One of my favorite parts of the entire original trilogy is the Jabba's palace escape scene, and I think that Han and Leia's relationship and how they've matured is an excellent example of this too. And Force-sensitive Leia is something that I hold so near and dear to my heart that I would just die for more exploration of. I just think that everything about this movie just really hits the right notes with me.
This is our most desperate hour. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
A New Hope. This is the one that started it all, guys. Like, there's nothing bad about this movie, especially now that a big plot hole of it has since been fixed. There's so much to love here. The cast, the characters, the writing, the overall imagination of it. I really think the characters push through this movie. They have so much heart that we have never seen since then. This movie is existed for the purity of being a good movie. And I said it in my review, and I'll say it again, this is the only one that's like that. Because everything else that follows is trying to emulate or top that to some extent. And A New Hope just sparked so much excitement into an entire generation, and a generation after that, and a generation after that of kids, myself included in that hodgepodge of excitement as well. And I just think that there's something really cool. Like, everyone has something that they have in this, you know? The mystery of the Force, the absolute wit of its characters like Princess Leia and Han Solo, the wanderlust curiosity of Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader's menacing presence. Everything about it just exudes excitement, and I love this. You can't go wrong with A New Hope.
What is it they've sent us?
Hope.
Rogue One, a Star Wars story. I'm sure some of you were wondering where this was going. It fixes the one wrong thing about A New Hope, and that is that there is a self-destruct button in the Death Star, and it makes an entire story of it. This is a movie that needed to exist, I think. And I can't say the same about Solo, but this one is what singular spin-off movies should be about. Their place in the Star Wars saga should feel solidified and cemented, and I really grew to really care about these characters. I was so sad when they died, but you understood why. Their death felt like it was for this greater purpose, and I can't say that I didn't appreciate it. And every callback and cameo in this, and the overall vibe of it just felt so 1970s, and for that to be emulated in 2016 is just amazing. I am awakened by The Force Awakens. This is the one that just exploded Star Wars again, and I think that this is the one done right. And it's the best one in the sequel trilogy, and it's my second favorite Star Wars movie because it hits so many emotional pulls. I mean, I feel I feel my heart swell every time I see that scene with the lightsaber goes to Rey's hand, and I think it has everything to do with finding characters that you identify with specifically. And I know that sounds corny, but this is my ranking, okay? This isn't on some necessarily critical scale. I love this movie. I just think that it brings the band back together in a way, while not entirely keeping them together. It still subverts expectations. It has a little bit of everything from the original trilogy in it, and I'm not afraid to admit that this does have a lot of fan service in it, and it does have a lot of callbacks, and it can be similar to A New Hope, but that's one of my favorite things about it. It revolutionizes it and keeps it fresh, though, too. You know, there's a lot of stuff here that we didn't see before. You know, we have a stormtrooper that defects. That's something that's never happened. And the types of faces and characters that we're seeing here now are different as well. And it's a new generation, and everything about this does feel unbelievably fresh. The fight scenes, the drama of it all, the dialogue is better, the acting is the best we've ever seen. Everything about The Force Awakens just yields to a great time. And in the end, that's what Star Wars is all about.
Why, you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder!
Empire Strikes Back. I don't even feel like I need to explain. because I've said numerous times that Empire Strikes Back is my favorite Star Wars movie. It's the end all be all for me, personally. I can't think of a world where this wouldn't be my favorite Star Wars movie. You know, beginning to end, I think it's absolutely perfect. It has a properly built up romance. It has them taking up the sword. It has loss. It has failure. It has the bad guys winning, but it has that hope in it. And that's what Revenge of the Sith kind of lacks, that Empire totally has, is that it just has, it's infused with so much hope and vigor, and new characters like Lando and Yoda just bring something so fresh to the scene. And it somehow takes what A New Hope did and makes everything better, and it makes everyone more than eager to go see the next one. And it leaves you on the edge of your seat, but it also gives you that warm feeling that Star Wars should give you. And everything about it is just absolutely perfect to me, and nothing can ever change my mind about that. So, what is your ranking? I don't think, in my opinion, there is a wrong order to all of this. Unless Caravan of Courage or the other Ewok movie and the holiday special are like anywhere on this list in terms of your favorites, I don't think you have wrong answers here. I'm not out here to tell you how to be a Star Wars fan, so let me know down below. And may the Force be with you guys. Have a great day. The sky is blue, the grass is green, the sequels suck. Overall feng shui of this movie is off to... It's never been like the full frontal... Terrible phrasing, Courtney. Terrible phrasing.